I would be stunned that properties doubled in price from where they are now, considering the wages aren't going to grow. $100,000 is not the wage that it once was. It's good money, but it's not no worries money. Couples having kids becoming later because they're not feeling like they're financially there to be able to have children. You don't see many people having over 2 children these days because there is so much financial stress.
Politicians don't know what's going on the ground and the significant effect it has on consumers. Brandon Hudich from Mt.Pleasant Financial, thank you for joining us on the Stay Frosty Podcast. Brandon is a born and bred Geelong local. He's been around the block too many times than more can say. You're an experienced professional, and in all my dealings with you, everything's travelled smoothly with clients. Do you want to introduce yourself and just tell the crowd a bit about yourself?
Yeah, the crowd, the open crowd that we've got here. We're staying on theme here, being staying frosty, by the way. It is absolutely freezing in here, so... yes, Brandon Hudich, born and bred local. I went to St. Joseph's. I am a local boy. I've been here pretty much my whole life, apart from a very small stints overseas. I was in the banking industry since 21, 22. I just found a knack for it. I was between jobs as a carpenter and someone that I was playing local footy with at Post Hill was a bank manager, and they said, I reckon you'd be all right as a talker at a bank. So personal banker I went in as, and before too long I found myself up in head office at Westpac on Collins Street, and one thing led to another, and I was one of the youngest people to ever do my job in Victoria for that home finance manager role, which was cool, but I had no idea what I was doing. So it was really rested on time as and I'm doing my apprenticeship at the bank. I like to see it as just gaining experience along the way, which was good. So I sort of knew from my time at the bank that I knew I wanted to be a finance broker, simply because you're being able to look after yourself, be your own boss, not have to be on a teleconference twice a day in the corporate world. And I think that was a big thing for me, just to be able to do my work autonomously was really important to me, and be able to having my clients as my boss in a way to speak about that is the only time that I feel like I'm not doing well is when someone is asking what's going on with the file. I feel like our role is so much, like most professionals' role, is to keep your clients up to date with what's going on and make them feel included and educated, and you're part of their team. And that's what I find and pride myself on as much as possible. So that's where I feel like I fit into being a finance broker, and why I've sought so much joy over doing what I do. And Mt.Pleasant Financial since September last year. I was a subcontractor with a friend's business in Newtown, who really helped me mentor through the first few years and get any kinks out of my system that I had at Westpac. So
nice.
Which is really good.
Yeah, it's I guess working in that corporate environment and being dictated to in terms of how you do service delivery. The key takeaways from that in terms of professionalism are important, but then having to, I guess, go out on your own and stake out your own professional reputation on the line for your own clients is important. How do you find that client onboarding journey, between different demographics, whether it's someone's parents or children or an aged old demographic who are investing through an SMSF purchase or some sort? How do you find not just the onboarding journey, but the level of attention to not just detail, but the ongoing communication? Have you found it change over your time from the corporate world to now, or how are you finding those touch points with clients come about?
Yeah. So technology is changing all the time, and it's really important to stay up to date and protecting people's privacy regularly and the best way possible. So especially from when I first started, getting a lot of documents via email was the way to go. Even at the bank, that's pretty much how we delivered a lot of things back 10 years ago, 10 years plus. So the transition now, I mean, I get a portal that I load, and it's 2-factor for the clients to sort of log onto the portal. They can upload their documents that, I list what needs to be uploaded and they can drag and drop their files on there. I think that's really big for privacy and protecting people's data these days, which is, as we know, everything is data, data, data. If you can steal data, if you can, mine someone's data from any way possible, that's what's worth so much money. So it's the biggest part of your business that you have to protect because it's the most damaging that if anything gets out. So I think that is the biggest thing for how you see people these days. And in the transition over the years, it's been really careful to the people that aren't technology savvy to be able to do these things for them. So just trying to migrate as many people to that new way as possible, but also respect people's, I guess, boundaries that aren't technology savvy and that wouldn't be able to do things like that. And just finding what's comfortable with them. Some people are a lot more comfortable bringing their laptop in to see you and saying, hey, can I give you these documents in person? Can I print stuff off and give it to you? Can you scan it onto your system? And it's just about reading the client very early on. And I guess that the onboarding process for myself is really important to have a 5-minute conversation with somebody over the phone before they book in. If someone sends me a Calendly invite for 3 or 4 days' time, I'll always pick up the phone and say, hey, just wanted to have a quick chat before anything going forward and sort of find out what's going on, find out the person, just a little bit about them. Create that portal where possible, or get the documents that I require before going forward. If it's a corporate trustee or an SMSF or someone that is being referred from an accountant, for example, I try and get as much information off the accountant up front where possible, so then I can really alleviate the stress of somebody having to provide documents and do as much as I can of the heavy lifting on the other side. So I know a lot of brokers will try and get a full fact find filled out before the first meeting. Now, I think that's touch and go for who it's good for and not good for. I find that generally a couple of pay slips and some photo ID and a privacy consent form signed digitally online is enough for almost most people just to get the ball rolling. But things certainly transitioning over the years and making sure that you're up to date with things. And I believe trying to make it as easy as possible for somebody is the most important thing, because the less pushback you have, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Definitely. I compare emails to the old facsimiles. Solicitors used to be really annoyed when we used to get faxes, and when I was working and studying in the family law jurisdiction, we used to get the old fax at 5 p.m. on a Friday asking for our client to do supervised drug screening requests. So you could imagine picking up the phone.
Was that deliberately positioned at 5 o'clock on a Friday?
100%, and would ruin that other party's weekend. But you're right. In terms of the touch points for the onboarding procedure, a lot of people are implementing AI tools and online technology to bring on board into online software portals. Even the recent AML CTF Tranche 2 obligations that have come in for solicitors, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, accountants, that's another level of scrutiny and identification and more documents that clients need to provide, that they're now, it's an additional burden on them and an additional cost on small business. We try and, at Snow Law, we try and do a bit of both. If we're seeing an older demographic for wills and estates, we'll, post them their draft documents if they prefer. If they prefer to come in like you and do an appointment and sign the contract via DocuSign on the laptop there, we'll facilitate that as well. But like you said, it's really about picking up the phone and getting to know the crux of what the client's about. Getting a feel for their personality in terms of how they like to communicate. There's always different communication styles for different demographics and different level of education or experience. I always enjoy the conversations where clients will refer to me as Snowy, because I know they're comfortable with me. And if they're comfortable with me, then they're likely to give me the full truth, because you don't want your as a lawyer, you don't want your client lying to you, right? In terms of AI onboarding, for the AML CTF type of obligations, and that's all the anti-money laundering legislation, I see ourselves as the new tax collectors for the government. So that, we have to essentially, like, for example, in purchases, conveyancing, we withhold GST for a developer. How are you finding the implementation of AI in your profession?
I don't love it, to be honest. And I think it can be really helpful in some areas. Automation is really good to be able to help you in certain processes, but I'm a firm believer that people's personal data shouldn't be going through an AI tool. And a lot of the disclaimers and data on the back end, you really don't know what they're doing with it. And as we just referred to before, everything is data collection these days. And these are new companies. I might be called a skeptic here, and maybe I'm not educated enough in the process, but there's something about me that feeding my clients' personal details into an AI tool completely doesn't make me feel completely comfortable. If I'm not completely comfortable with it, why would I feel comfortable doing it with somebody else's details?
Yeah.
So whenever anything goes through an AI tool, it doesn't disclose people's personal details. It's more of a general inquiry situation, which aids me to be able to complete something. I think that's really important because, you simply don't know, and we haven't found the long-term standing effects of what our data is being done with these AI tools. And the more it grows and the smarter it gets, what is it producing on the backside with these details?
Yeah, it is important for privacy and confidentiality purposes, which is why, our profession has come out and said if you use AI with client matters, you waive legal professional privilege, which is huge for our profession. But not just that, we've got courts coming out with practice directions on, the ethical use of AI. And it's funny, the legal profession is probably the most susceptible or vulnerable to AI taking over. But then I go back to the movie, The Minority Report, and I think to myself, well, do you want AI justice? Like, no one can trust AI. Like, we're running through, for purchase matters, you can appreciate we're running through millions of dollars for our trust account. If an AI tool is doing that, who do you sue when they lose your money?
Correct.
So it's important that, like you said, that data collection and data mining, you don't know what's going on in the background. So, a lot of legal professional will use a closed legal AI tool for just research purposes, but never really share client information because all of a sudden, all that litigation claim. Like I've had litigation with self-represented parties where I know they've used AI, but they've literally made our case. Like, have you seen instances where clients have used AI to their detriment in financial services?
Not so much detriment. I've definitely seen emails come through from clients where you can tell that it is AI. Now, that's completely fine. Where someone's just spoken to an AI tool and it's summarized and organized their thoughts. I think that's a really good use of AI. Although, again, with the caveat of we wanting to protect each person's privacy. So I think that people probably, especially older clients, aren't aware of that, the confidentiality that doesn't rest within those tools. So, but not to anybody's detriment as much, but rather than, I was looking online, and when someone says online now, it's much still, I found this, or, I found this, blah, blah, blah. And the hallucinations that we know that our AI tools can have and just make up data, and you're then going in and saying, hey, well, that's not actually correct. And they're like, well, I found it from this. And it's like, you need to be aware that if it can't find out a quick solution, it doesn't make something up. So I hope it's not listening to me right now, just to bring it down. But I think back to what we were saying before, the KYC element of what we do is knowing your client is what it stands for, is something that I don't believe that any tool or any online service that's ever going to replace a professional service worker. People go to somebody for a service, and it's that human touch and being able to fully disclose a situation to a professional like yourself, and give me all the data and let me figure out what we should be saying and what we shouldn't be saying.
That's right.
Because I need to know the whole story to be able to do the best service for you. I know what I can say and what I can't say, and what we can get away with and what we can't. So give me all the details, and I'll let you know the rest. Where if you're not a professional in that area and you're trying to come up with the best solution, and you're using a tool, it's not going to help differentiate what the best thing is, or those sort of things.
It's just going to spit out what it's programmed to do.
Correct.
And in terms of that, I'm very much on the same tone, that a lot of what we do is a relationships-based business. So you still have to have that human element to it. It's really about the user of the AI tool and how you benefit the client. Because, for every litigation case or dispute, we've got a case strategy in place. So, you're not going to show all your cards at once. Whereas in that example I gave before, the guy literally showed all of his cards and made out our case for us. And, it was about a person who had bought a horse and wants a refund because the horse died shortly thereafter. In terms of the benefits of having a relationship-based business, and then the relationships you have with financiers, because of course, the benefit of going to someone like yourself is the fact you're not locked into one bank or one interest rate. you can shop around to all these different lenders. How do you leverage those relationships with all those different financiers? Do you, essentially pick up the phone, catch up for coffees? Do you have one particular BDM from a finance company in mind that you contact all the time, or what's that process? What's behind the scenes for your clients?
It's about staying up to date as much as possible. Staying up to date, whether it's through webinars or, those new emails that come out, the newsletters, staying on top of those. As you mentioned, the business development manager side of it, the person that works at the bank is the BDM, and they contact you, catching up with them for coffee and maybe some things that you may have missed. And then they come and spruce the bank. They come and spruce what they're doing better than anybody else and what niches they have. And, that's really important to stay on top of. And pricing is a really big thing. When I had a client contact me this week and said, our loan's currently with XYZ. We can see, I've seen online that their rate is slightly better than ours, but there are better rates online. I know that I'd worked with that bank recently, and that BDM sort of said to me, hey, our pricing or our rates aren't that sharp to advertise what you'll see online. But if you send me a discretionary pricing approval, I'll be able to match XYZ.
Yeah, nice.
Now, why that's good is because that bank has a specific set of policies that might be good for that one client, and moving may not be in the client's best interest, but saving the interest is.
Yeah.
So whilst it's not best for them to be moving, being able to match their interest rate of what they wanted to move to save the money anyway is the best for them.
Yeah.
So knowing those things and the under table offers that that the banks constantly are throwing out are important. There is a big push from banks at the moment for digital online home loans. Now, there's a few out there that a very simple way to structure a home loan. Mum and dad are both PAYG clients, so they work for a company and they get pay slips. Very simple structure. Almost like an AI tool, essentially. Now, I don't know that for fact, but it's seemingly like that it's processed very, very simply and very, very easily, or someone offshore that just ticks the boxes and moves it on.
Yeah.
Those sort of situations are we're finding that are good for people that are no fuss, no worries, that just want to deal with that.
Cookie cutter.
It's not good for the broker because the banks don't allow us to be able to write these products. They pretty much try and undercut you for these, but that's where the relationship and the service is really coming out of it, where the bank is then disengaging themselves. They're taking even their own service out of it and just trying to play the card of, well, this is the future. Well, if you haven't got a relationship with that client, then they're going to leave you the next time a best offer comes up anyway. So I think that that revolution that they're trying to bring in there to try and win back the market share that they don't hold at the moment.
Yeah.
It's almost 80% if it isn't there already. The stats were out recently that it's almost an 80% market share that any new loans that come through Australia are broker written.
Yeah.
80% is a huge number.
Yeah, that's massive.
It's ginormous to what it used to be 15 years ago, where there was not many brokers out there, but I think everybody knows a broker now, especially since I've started as a broker 7 years ago. It's just exploded. Now there's so many different types of brokers out there as well. You'll have your what I like to say the mortgage factory, of where it'll be a big mortgage broker firm that'll have 15 mortgage brokers underneath it, and they'll have a big office somewhere. They'll work remotely and all this other things. To you could have like a one-man band, like myself. I do everything from go to woe. You might have someone that is like a 3 or 4 person operation where they might have a mortgage broker, another mortgage broker, and 2 assistants that serve everybody to help the workflow go through. There's so many different services that people provide, and I think that's why we, as a mortgage broking service now, hold such a significant number in that.
Yeah.
Because even within the service we provide, there are several services that you can go to for what fits you, and I think that's really important for us as mortgage brokers. And I don't think that there is a one size fits all, that there's one person that is good for everybody. You've got to understand that everybody is an individual. Everybody's going to get along with different people. And if someone comes in to see you and there's not a connection there, you can't get heartbroken over these things for them going elsewhere.
That's right. It's a horses for courses type argument.
Correct.
And it's funny that you mentioned about banks trying to undercut brokers. I've heard on the grapevine recently that banks want to open up their own conveyancing arms and take over the conveyancing space. Funnily enough, not many people know that PEXA, which is the electronic conveyancing platform that's now mandated for pretty much 3/4 of Australia, is owned by the banks and a superannuation company. So essentially every transaction that transacts through PEXA, which is, millions a year, the banks are making a windfall, and then they're trying to take over the conveyancing space. And then I'm thinking, how does that not work on a conflict of interest space if they're also the lender and the conveyancer? Because or the lawyer doing the conveyancing, like you have to be independent and impartial in all your advice. They're only going to be self-interested in getting the loan over the line and the loan drawn down by the client so they could start charging interest. So it's interesting now that we're starting to see this move of them trying to go into other spaces. In terms of the bank's response to the recent budget changes and the announcements for corporate tax changes, have you found any, I guess, stringent terms or reconsideration of borrowing capacity that has affected your clients, or do you think that it's a minimal effect on existing clients?
It is for investors in particular, is a huge shift in the market. Not for just the borrowing purposes, not for property purposes, but as a whole. Now, for our side of it, it took some banks some time to come. I mean, what was it? The 11th of May, those announcements were made, and there's still some banks that are only just now in this week at the start of July that are coming out with the policies on reflection, how they treat the removal of negative gearing, but implementing the rental add-backs or rental expenses add-backs and how that can affect your borrowing capacity as well. So whilst we're getting rid of one, they're now, okay, well, the rental property is still going to be costing you money. So what's some different things to add into the calculator as well, which I find it interesting that they've taken a really slow, deliberate approach to be able to deliver the best thing possible for themselves, and maybe a reflection of what other banks are doing at the moment and how they can better position themselves in the market. But it still continues to roll out, and I'm sure that it will continue to change all the time. So I don't want to speak too much on the continually rolling system because the information that I say now might be non-existent in a couple of weeks. But borrowing capacities have dived.
You're right, because we recently saw the proposed legislation for testamentary trusts and corporate trustees, and they've got a word in there, established testamentary trusts. So it all comes down to the definitions and what's eventually gazetted in the Victorian Government Gazette to then bring in the legislation. Like, what is the definition of established? Does a testamentary trust who's now exempt from the corporate tax changes, does it need to be in place now? Does a will need to be signed now? Or is it any other will that's signed post the implementation of that legislation? It's unfortunate that the consultation with the profession as a whole is piecemeal. I feel we get shortchanged. Politicians don't know what's going on the ground and the significant effect it has on consumers. I think this is one of the major fiscal monetary policies that they've finally brought in, apart from playing with the interest rates. It seems like Australia's macro and microeconomic policy is simply based on which way the pendulum swings on interest rates, which can't be the only measure for how you manage an economy. I won't speak on the political parties, but we do know that one's known to be better fiscally than the other in terms of spending. But Victoria's got a significant debt problem. And I think that's more reflective in people's own lives as well. People are still living paycheck to paycheck, even if they're on a good income. There's always, house insurance premiums are going up. Our own insurance premiums are going up as small business owners. We've got the same day, PAYG, same day super coming in on a weekly payroll if you pay that, or monthly payroll if you pay it that way. How do you think people are starting to change their spending habits in order to save for that initial 10, 20% deposit?
A very deliberate approach. More people sitting down now and I'm finding with my clients anyway, I deal with a lot of first home buyers. They'll come in and they'll say from the word get go that I really encourage people to, before you even think that you're going to be able to buy a house, come in. And then I'll be able to give you the steps that I believe that will help you get into where you need to be. So I always strongly suggest doing a budget. Now, you're not always going to stick to your budget. If there's a long weekend somewhere in the month, it could be really hard to stick to a budget. But planning for your holidays, planning for all these sort of different things are really important. So I believe there's been a shift probably in the last 12 months with money seeming like it's more scarce than ever. It feels like people are doing it harder more than ever. Mortgage stress is up. Speaking to people that are on the arrears on their home loans, with the arrangements that they are to catch up and what their situations are, I feel like people are being a lot more deliberate in their approach. And while it may seem over a longer period of time that it's been happening, but couples having kids is becoming later because they're not feeling like they're financially there to be able to have children. And especially with, say, in this part of the world, you don't see many people having over 2 children these days. And because there is so much financial stress, look at how much daycare is. It is crazy.
Well, I recall an NAB advert that used to have the life journey of a child and then how much that investment was. Now, this ad was at least a good 10 years old, and it would say that a child cost you $250,000 until the end of university. And I'm like, well, that's probably double or triple now, like in terms of the way cost of living and inflation has occurred. And the government's really concentrating on inflation so that interest rates don't spike, but it's also the level of unemployment. And there's different definitions of unemployment now, so casual workers, part-time workers and the like. So, you change a definition, then essentially it means it goes from a caged egg to a free-range egg. That's essentially the turn of a definition. But it's important for clients to understand the financial impact kids can have. I also read an article, a family law journal in the Law Institute, saying essentially a lot of the divorces are caused by financial pressures from having kids. Having 3 kids myself, I can completely appreciate that. That causes a lot of stress on the family. And if divorce rates spike, no one makes money. Essentially, you have to sell the matrimonial home. Do you work with a lot of, highly emotional or highly emotive clients in those situations? If you do, how do you manage that emotional journey with them? How do you work out a way that works out that they're both winning at the end of the transaction? Is that something you can touch on?
I'm not licensed in that area to be able to have those conversations. So I try and steer clear of them as best as possible. And one of the big things that people don't realize is that, I'm going to try and word this in the right way, but if things aren't done correctly, you're not protecting yourself in the middle of a separation. If you're going to keep the home and you've paid somebody else out, if it's not written down, they can come back to, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can come back to you in a couple of years and be like, well, house is going up. Didn't have a written agreement. I want more money, or I didn't know that at the time. So if you don't have a written agreement, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that it can spiral out.
Oh, definitely. I always laugh when clients will say, I just need you to review this letter. We're both going to sign it. And I'm like, wait, it's not even worth the paper it's written on. If it goes to court, it's going to get thrown out unless it's a binding financial agreement, which has to follow strict legal protocols to occur that way. I mean, we've got a lot of amicable clients who are willing to separate on the basis that one party receives a property, another person receives a payout, but there's always legal risks in tow if something goes wrong down the track and someone feels like they've been ripped off.
How do you feel about, in saying that, when we have, say, a young couple that in their mid to late 20s and they've separated, they sell the house and they split it 50-50. Is there too many arguments when there's no kids in that situation? Is there too many arguments that come out the other side?
There is. It all, like the lawyers will always say, it depends on the facts, right? Like you could have one party who's saved his whole life and contributed significantly to purchasing his first home, and then he's got a de facto partner who's come in and they've been with her for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and essentially they've contributed to the home as well by maintaining, upkeeping, contributing to the rates payments or the mortgage repayments. But, the first party, whether it be the husband or the wife, they're the ones that have significantly contributed to that purchase price. That's when you have to start. I mean, you have to get yourself, like you said, early advice. You have to get ready in terms of how that's going to work for you. If I've got a couple and one person saying, I'm in a short-term relationship, but I'm putting up the bulk of the money, then you split the ownership of the title to reflect how much money you're contributing. So if someone's contributing 70% of the purchase price, they can go on title owning 70% and the other person owns 30% because you can describe it in that fashion. But not a lot of people will do that. They'll just go, yeah, we're joint owners, we're going to go jointly. But, if you pass away, the surviving owner takes title of the property, so you really have to think about your succession planning very early on as a young professional. Everyone hates planning for their death. No one likes to sort it out. I mean, I had my first will created once I had children, which is, 26, 27. Not a lot of people before 30 are getting their wills done. But it is a key part of your, I guess, succession planning in the background, whether it's your binding death benefit nomination, your superannuation insurance, your will goes hand in hand with that.
Yep.
And it's important, like you said, you get early advice on, you find out what you need, because a lot of people who are in small business don't know about the fact that if you do a spousal transfer of the property into your partner's name because you're a director for asset protection purposes, that's a void transaction because it's done to defeat creditors. So if you're doing the spousal transfer to defeat creditors coming after your business, they can actually trace that property through the Transfer of Land Act if they can prove that that was for the dominant purpose of the spousal transfer.
Right.
So if you're establishing a business and all of a sudden there's a spousal transfer occurs, they're like, well, you're a director. At the time of the directorship, you then transferred the matrimonial home. We're going to consider that a void transaction. If, for example, you're purchasing a house and you're going, all right, well, I'm going to do my estate planning and my wills now, and you get advice from a solicitor, and the dominant purpose of either the spousal transfer or the purchase of the home is for estate planning purposes, and it's no longer a void transaction. But these are the intricacies that lawyers will know about because that's always been the case. Accountants will always give you advice to say asset protection, as they should, because that's what they're interested in with their clients in terms of tax minimization or tax treatment. But I think you need to have the right professionals around you, that the broker, the financial planner, the accountant, and the solicitor. And if they're all working on the same page for the client's best interest, things will happen smoothly. Mm-hmm. Where things fall apart is when no one's talking to each other. So like in a conveyancing process, I know brokers will do their figures on the purchase price, less deposit, approximate legal fees. This is what you'll need as a shortfall. We'll always give that advice to our clients' brokers as well to see whether our figures all match up. And then they'll look at it and go, oh, no, our stamp duty figure's not right. You've got to go and apply this concession, because we're now doing all the duties concessions for clients. We need to be aware of what concessions may or may not apply. Brokers aren't expected to know any longer. They, in my opinion, they should know as part of their role what concessions are available for first home buyers. For example, you've got the first home owner scheme, and you've got different grants for different purposes. What I found though is that a lot of conveyancers won't go into that level of depth or knowledge. Like you said, we keep ourselves up to date on webinars. We do CPDs every year. I keep my ear to the ground by staying involved in the Law Institute of Victoria property law committees. So I see what legislations are coming up and what grants are available. So for example, if you're buying a commercial property, because I think what's going to happen now with all these budget changes and the SMSF lending restrictions is all that money is going to move to commercial property. Commercial property took a massive hit during COVID, and everyone got out of the commercial game because their portfolio was too full of it and they had to flip for a loss. Now we're going to see the money come back into that commercial game.
Well, it's got to go somewhere, doesn't it?
Well, you just got to go where the money is, and international investment will still come down here because we're an attractive market, and especially Geelong. What people don't know, for example, is you get a regional stamp duty discount on commercial property that's equivalent to 50%, which is huge, right?
Massive.
So instead of going into this new commercial industrial property tax regime, which is known as a CIPT, where you pay your stamp duty over a 10-year loan to the government and you pay a 1% indexation, which could increase over those 10 years, depending on what happens in introducing new legislation, you can just get a 50% stamp duty whack at settlement and that's it. So it's a significant cost saving. How do you find keeping up to date with, State Revenue Office rules? Because they've got their own draft rulings. You can seek commissioner discretions on a few things, especially in estate matters. Do you continuously get updates from the SRO? So you're...
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important, especially I massively play in the first homeowner space. So especially with stamp duty waivers, or any changing, you need to stay on top of it because it's important to understand the changes to your clients and especially their borrowing capacities of what it all relates back to. So if someone's only got a certain borrowing capacity, they can only borrow 800,000, and if 40,000 of that is going to be eaten up by stamp duty, then they're only really borrowing 760 to purchase the property because inside their borrowing capacity, they need to allow for their stamp duty if depending on how they're borrowing funds, especially if they're using another property for a security and whatnot. So any changes to commercial properties, you need to be able to work these into your figures.
Yeah.
And have, as you said before, you need to have that team around you that can support you through the process and make sure that you've got everything that's up to date.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel that the government rushes through legislation that works in their own interest in terms of some of those grants that are given for the first homeowners. The SRA gets a charge on the property and benefits in the equity. But then for something like the traditional first home buyer, where you're buying as your principal place of residence, none of those purchase prices have been indexed to the current market rate. Like
it's horrible right now because you're seeing that the house prices go up so steadily. Now, those caps for the first home buyers, they're probably super regional Victoria rather than, Geelong's more of a out of metro part of Victoria now rather than a regional city or a regional hub, I believe. But, your 600 grand's going a lot further in places like Warrnambool or Horsham for obvious reasons. You don't have the lifestyle ability, well, maybe Warrnambool does, but it's a little bit further away from Melbourne CBD. So these changes are massive, and hopefully at one point in time that it's we can see that they'll increase, and we do expect them to increase at some stage. But the no stamp duty under 600,000, where I see people take huge advantage of this, especially in our area, in our region, is that the no stamp duty for under 600,000 is on the purchased allotment. So whether it's got a house or a block of land on it, that's what it is under. So if you purchase a block of land for under 600,000,
it's no stamp duty.
No stamp duty. It doesn't matter if you build the house on it. People get a little bit confused and like, I don't have to pay tax on building a house. Well, actually, you pay a little bit more because you're paying GST, and that is the tax that you pay on the build. So where it works really well for a first home buyer is if you purchase land for under 600,000, you don't pay stamp duty on that. You can use your first home lender's deposit scheme of your 5%. You're putting in 5%. No lender's mortgage insurance, or the government will guarantee your property purchase up to $950,000. Nice. Now, why this is important is because if you have that land that's purchased under 600,000, no stamp duty, and then you have the build component or the construction that could take you all the way up to that 950, you're paying no stamp duty, no LMI, all the way up to that. So
nice.
I feel like that's something that
it's a bit of a better product.
It is. It's a benefit, and I've steered people in that direction. That they've come to me and they're like, this is our purchase amount. I'm like, if you're looking to purchase from 950 to $1 million, are you aware that you're paying almost $60,000 stamp duty by purchasing that much? That's a huge difference as a first home buyer. If you consider, it's building site for everybody, and I'm not saying that it is, but I've had a few clients that have pivoted and gone, wow, 60 grand. Like, I don't have to save that amount. I don't have to save my $60,000 or $50,000 plus my 5% on that purchase amount. So
it is such a burden and a hurdle for first home buyers to come across. But I just think it's laughable that traditional first home buyer price is anywhere between 600 fully exempt or 750 partial exemption. And I'm like, who's buying a house for 750 these days? There's really very little. Like you said, you're pushed out to the country Victoria region and pretty much the outskirts of the Geelong Bellarine area, because you can't find a property unless it's 30 years old and dilapidated, right? Like, I just think, the government picks and chooses where they want to implement policies, but then doesn't actually take care of the market that we should be concerned about. Because ultimately, if you're pushing first home buyers outside of the property market, property prices have nowhere else to go but down. And we're seeing that effect now, and it's all, all the news, all the mass media is doom and gloom. Property prices have dropped, and it's like, well,
there's reason for this.
Everyone foresaw that coming. It's not all doom and gloom.
I think the interesting part of what we're probably seeing coming into our markets is that where so many investors, interstate investors, Sydney buyers, Melbourne buyers that were buying unseen, buying in places in the northern suburbs of Geelong, sight unseen being that they've got a property advocate that's going in, finding a property for them based on location, land size, saying, it's perfect, it's going to go up in value. They don't know the area that well. And these was getting a real premium as of late. In the last 6 months, we were seeing in Norlane, parts of Corio go, for the average property, we're not talking a property that's got on 2,000 squares or anything like that. An average property that it's going for 650 plus, which, if you know these areas, which is big money. Now, I know someone that has very recently, in the last couple of weeks, purchased a property in these same areas. Yes, it is a full renovation on the house, 365. Now, is that because so many of these buyers that are sight unseen have now left the market? I don't know. Maybe it's an anomaly in the market as well. But you're seeing a shift that's bargain basement prices.
Yeah.
No, we haven't
100%.
seen those prices for quite some
Well,
time.
we know it was always going to happen where people were going to divest
Mm.
and people are going to get rid of surplus stock. And I think this is the whole purpose of bringing in these tax changes is the government's created a housing crisis. It's not just a housing crisis, it's also an immigration problem because we're bringing in more people from outside of Australia that we have a housing supply for. So that's why we have a housing crisis. But then they're making it our problem by having to divest our surplus stock. And so investors can't afford to hold on, especially with the land tax rules that come in, reducing it from 200, 250 to 50 odd thousand. All these people are getting massive land tax bills. So they got no other choice. They can no longer sit on that land. They need to flip it because the vacant residential land tax rate is 3 or 5 times more than what an occupied property has land tax on. So, I think a lot of people still aren't talking about, for example, the windfall gains tax that farmers will cop once their property's rezoned, and they haven't even done anything to rezone the land.
There's a lot of land out in Armstrong Creek that's just sold for a pretty penny on the other side of that bridge. That's out in Grovedale now.
That's what I'm. Once a council application goes in, because we need to extend the urban boundary because of this housing crisis that we have, all of a sudden these farmers we got another tax on a tax in terms of being a windfall gains, but they did nothing to get that windfall. It was all councils rezoning policies or planning policies that get implemented, and it's the farmers that cop it. And they've owned those farms intergenerational.
Years.
Hundreds of years nearly. Like I know a farm out of the Green Ridge in Werribee where they came over from in Australia in 1917. I was like, holy crap. Like my mum's family came over in the 60s. You know what I mean? Like this whole movement to then tax the everyday Australian, and we know Australia is very multicultural, but for wanting to build their own wealth and service the generations forward, really the only way you can do that is through testamentary trust and estate planning now. And now they're trying to have a go at that. They're trying to introduce a death tax or float the idea of introducing a death tax. They want your inheritors to have to pay your HEX debt if there's any HEX debt associated. And the only reason why they float that now is because it's going to be a big push in a couple of years. I mean, we saw all the memes and all the videos of Albanese talking about we're not going to touch negative gearing. We're not going to touch a negative gearing. All that rhetoric means nothing when push comes to shove, when it comes to budget time. Yep. And people start to seriously need to consider how they vote with whether they spend their money on certain products or how they vote at the polls.
Do we not hold politicians to a high enough standard in our country?
Well,
is that the problem?
You
only need to look at who's running and who's. You can cut this out.
Carefully, yeah.
Thankfully sliding in the polls at the moment, but you only need to look about who's running and who gains a lot of popularity.
My greatest annoyance with our political system in Australia is that we have people who are supposed to be working in the public's best interests. They have big business lobbyists who fund them, and we know this now. It's all getting exposed through the new age politicians that are coming through. But they don't represent the people anymore. They represent themselves, their mates, in big business. We know that by all there was actually in the first time in one of the very few times in history we had full bipartisan support in politics in terms of the majority of each party was in support of imposing an additional gas tax. None of it came in. And we actually saw the commercials from all the refineries coming up and saying, well, we provide clean gas and energy, and they were literally lobbying the people through their infomercials, right? For me, there's not enough accountability in terms of negligent decisions that are made by politicians. Yeah. They still, and we saw it with Dan Andrews, they go off into their red carpet on their white horse. He's getting a statue getting built for him. A lot of the things he did was to put Victoria into debt and generations into debt by just printing money and making money worthless. There is no accountability where they still get their pensions, they still get their flights around Australia, they still catch in business class. Why are we continuously paying for MPs' pensions where they're not? There has to be some sort of measure of of utility, whether they've actually been an advantage in their role and what sort of policies they've brought in, whether they've actually provided a gainful or meaningful contribution to society, and whether that's within their local electorate, whether that's within their own portfolio, within their seat. In my time at the Law Institute of Victoria, I dealt with a lot of politicians in terms of advocating and consulting on behalf of the solicitors, and some of them are really switched on. They know what they're talking about. I mean, they're in meetings all the time, so they're getting informed by the people that are on the ground. But then all it takes is for that politician to get switched portfolio, and then all that good work that's been done is just pretty much getting pushed the agenda from the top. And there's all these backbenchers that have their own agendas and have their own say that aren't front facing. So there is no accountability at the MP level because they literally walk out and still get their pensions. I mean, I saw recently the Federal Circuit Court Chief Justice having a crack at the judges' profession as a whole, at the judiciary, saying we've got judges who are retiring who haven't delivered sentences on their decisions. Even judges who are sitting there for 2-3 years haven't delivered the judgments on trial hearings they've held 2-3 years ago. How do you expect people to move on in life without that sense of justice or without that finality in their matter?
You can't get somebody else to come in and make that decision and relook at everything again. Like that's not fair.
No.
Back to your point before about MP sort of rolling through. What baffles me is that how they can go after their job into a lobbyist role.
Oh, mate.
And then they still find themselves in Parliament every other week on a visitor's pass.
Well,
if you worked in, I know we're going to highlight it now because it's been the eat in a bit thing to poke fun at and get pissed off about is the gas tax. If you're working in as someone that's looking after natural resources, you should not be allowed to go work for a gas company afterwards.
Yeah, listen, that what they may declare their conflict in a directors meeting, but the public don't know what that conflict is. Yeah. They don't know what remuneration they're getting. It's a bit of a joke to think that Australia is still not a colony. I mean, we saw that during COVID. Every jurisdiction has their own health act, and everyone implemented their own COVID policies as and when required.
We're states, we're not.
And I still feel like, the fact that we've got this natural gas resource that's being exported, and so, we're getting direct foreign investment that don't pay any tax to us. It shows us that we're still that colonized country where all our resources just getting taken and taken and taken. And then literally we're used as a testing pool because now that we've brought in these corporate tax changes, especially with SMSF unrealized gains, where SMSFs have over $3 million in their portfolio, that's now getting tested in Norway. The right to work from home that's being legislated, that's now getting tested in European companies. So I feel like we're the test case. And if we don't riot, and Australia is a very young country politically. When I did my double major in law and politics, we went through, the whole 19th century revolution from, the French Revolution through to World War II, through to modern day politics and policies that are implemented. Australia is very immature in its political rhetoric. We're now seeing it become more sophisticated and transparent with the new age demographic that's coming into the scheme. But we don't riot like...
No. We're very soft as a nation.
No, and even then...
Incredibly soft. And people are like, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. So no, it does affect you.
Yeah.
Everything affects you.
And if
it doesn't affect you, it affects your neighbor, your best friend,
your family.
Your family
generations.
Members.
Yeah. We have to get a permit for a right to protest. How is that not paternalistic intervention in your constitution?
Sounding less and less like democracy, isn't it?
For freedom of movement. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so if you want to look at a proper revolt or a proper protest, look at what the French people did when they disagree with the government, or look at the riots that occur in Latin America when people are essentially being ripped off by the government. Australia's not like that. We have a very immature political rhetoric, which means people don't have to go out and vote. So therefore, a lot of our political campaigns are negative campaigns, meaning it's not, this is what I can do for you.
Yeah, this is what...
Don't vote for him because this is what he did. It's a very critical campaign. So instead of...
The baby USA syndrome sometimes, especially things that are coming in once you see what's been happening in the United States for so long and the transition of what they've gone through. I mean, there was an initial one story and now it's very much a second state.
But you can't trust anything that they say. So I try. I mean, our family nucleus and what we do it very sits outside of anything that's going on in the world, internationally, because I think at the end of the day, you can only worry about your four walls.
Correct.
And if you're going to get caught up in that political rhetoric, how are you supposed to then deliver for your clients? It's good to keep informed, but I guess not to get over anxious about it or not to think about the doom and gloom of it all, because really it's about positioning yourself now to best suit yourself in the future and how you're then going to provide for your legacies in terms of your children and their children and so on and so on. So, And that's why a lot of we do is wills and estate planning, because it's not just, okay, you're buying a house, we're doing your conveyancing. It's, okay, well, what does your asset portfolio look like? What have you actually got under the hood? Have you got companies? Have you got corporate trustees? Have you got your binding nominations? Have you got superannuation insurance? Have you got life insurance in place? So it's a very holistic approach to that client onboarding. It's not just, here, fill this information out and that's it. It's actually sitting down, getting to know them. A lot of people will want testamentary trusts, but then once we sit down with them, it's like, well, we don't need it for now. This will be the first iteration of our will. And then once we come 20 years and our kids are adults and we know what that looks like, we'll then do our testamentary trust then. I mean, unfortunately, with the legislative changes now, we might be forced in the position where we'll have to rush to do them. But it's interesting that we're having the whole Western culture is reacting to the failure of capitalism and its failure to deliver utility to everyone, because ultimately in a capitalist society, people need to be in suffrage for the middle class to exist. And now we've got such a burgeoning middle class that their wealth is being eaten away to solve a government problem, And so, I was always taught that ultimately the property market will never fail. The government can't let it fail. And we saw that when they bailed out Metricon. The government will only ever bail out an industry when they know that there's going to be such a significant effect on a large population. So I was always taught in my family that at the end of the day, brick and mortar in property investment is always the way to go, because you will never lose value on it.
Do you still believe that?
Deep down, I do. I think at the end of the day...
Is that because that's the only thing you've ever known?
That's not... No, I've played in crypto and a few other things. I think the share market's a bit of a gamble, but you need to have the right professionals around you. So you need to employ share brokers or financial planners who know what they're doing, especially in the crypto market, if you're going to use SMSF for that purpose. I feel that you need to... It's not just throwing it up at a balloon, carnival show. You need to have the right buyers advocates in place. You need to do your research. You need to know where to buy, because essentially you're not stuck in one jurisdiction. You don't need to buy in Victoria. You can go buy in Queensland where it's up and coming and it's already boomed. You can buy in New South Wales in the right areas. You can buy in the Northern Territory, Tasmania. Like, you need to have the right professionals around you to teach you and guide you where that capital growth is. So I think it's just become more sophisticated. Back when I was investing, you could invest in anything and it's going to grow. It's just dependent on your borrowing capacity. I truly believe property is always a solid investment. I think at the end of the day, we've got too much of a population burden and a rental crisis, which shows us that property is still a good investment, because you'll get as long as you get a good tenant in. But Victoria is not very tenant jurisdiction friendly for landlords. So I think that's why we see a lot of investors go elsewhere. But I think commercial property is now where it's going to see a big boom, especially for SMSF lending as well. But yeah, I still truly believe property is the right investment, but you can't just go in without doing your research and having the right team around you. I definitely think, I mean, they're not making it attractive. And when I say they, I mean the politicians, by bringing in all these legislative changes to the Residential Tenancies Act. Like, you've got to have minimum standards before you even advertise for rent. So if you're buying a property and it's not ready on settlement for that purpose, you've got to then put more money up front to then bring the property up to the minimum standards and then rent it out. Like, you can't even market it without that stuff. So I mean,
the way the property's going these days, I would be stunned that if properties doubled in price from where they are now, considering the wages aren't going to grow. I mean, we're probably seeing now that, and this is probably, I don't want to be seen as underhanded by saying this, but $100,000 is not the wage that that it once was. $120,000 is now, it's good money, but it's not no worries money. Where you're talking 20 years ago, 120 grand, 150 is like you've got a lot of spare cash. And I just don't see that property is going to have a steep growth period in established spots as it once was.
No, I agree with that.
And it's going to make it a lot harder for people to grow their property portfolios or grow their personal wealth in a way that it once was.
I mean, the majority of people we know don't own 2 investment properties. Like, it's very hard to get to 2. It's even harder to get to 3 investment properties. So if you've at least got one that you're banking on to cash in on the capital growth over an 11-year growth cycle, It just means that if you can hold on to your assets through this cycle,
Yeah.
you don't sell.
Yeah,
You just
100%.
keep-
And that's a really good bit of advice that I once got from an accountant was don't sell property unless you have to.
Yeah.
Hold on to everything that you possibly can until it's pretty much breaking point and you need to sell.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to be missing out on unrealized growth. There is, I know somebody that had to build in a certain part of Geelong, and to be able to complete that, they were maybe hit and miss with maybe put themselves under a little bit of financial stress whilst they're in construction for one property. Could have held on to one, and the advice was that, but they said, no, we'll play it safe. We want to make sure that we're safe and secure, which is completely fine. That is a way to make sure that you're comfortable in the way that you're living constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, if you ask them, well, we should have done it. We would have made 400 grand if we just had held on to that property for a period. Now, COVID is a different way, and you need to be, again, we're talking about financial stress that on relationships. Would they be in a different position if they were going through that? Perhaps. Did they make the best decision for them? They don't think so now, but had the story been different if they were under financial stress?
Well, hindsight's a beautiful thing, right?
always
Like
2020.
not everyone has the foresight. Like I remember when I was buying land in Torquay, I knew I should have bought a second block, and I was trying to convince Mum to buy a second block with me because I already knew 12 months later my block was already worth 150 grand more.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in my area bought that second and third block, and they're comfortable now. Right. So, hindsight.
Yeah. You think that when you look at something, you'll be like, oh, yeah, it should have. But in reality, your hindsight.
Yeah. But not just that. I always think comparison is a thief of joy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, and we all know in life, if we go back to our Western traditions and our upbringings, like you shouldn't be comparing yourself to the next couple or chasing the Jonases and this is what reality TV is based on, right? We're all trying to chase that next dream. We think that if we buy that new car, we're going to be happy. We think if we buy a new house, we're going to be comfortable. If we've got a sudden abundance of money, it's going to equal happiness. Yes, money will make things easier.
Money definitely makes things easier. It doesn't make you happy.
No, but if you're always comparing yourself to the Jonases, then you're never going to be happy. So really, if you just...
And you don't know what goes on in somebody else's house.
No.
It's people that you're comparing yourself to could have great financial struggles. And yes, they spend a lot of money and it looks flashy and it's nice, but you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I find that very, very true. Don't compare yourself to other people because you don't know what's going on with them or why they're doing things. Are they happy? Are they not happy? And they might be happy.
Oh, mate, I know millionaires.
But you don't know. You don't know.
Millionaires on paper who are extremely unsatisfied with their lives, and I know people who are on the bare essentials who are extremely happy with their lives because happiness is produced internally, and it's about all your four walls. So and that's why I always come back to what's going on with my wife and my kids? Are we happy? Are we experiencing a life that we should be experiencing as humans? Because we're human beings, not human doings, right? Like at the end of the day, my kids.
Is that a Simpsons quote that you've thrown at me?
I don't know. I've heard it before, but I've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, both girls, and I've got a 7-year-old boy. Like my life is now living for their memories and their legacies. Like I don't want them to see me working and slaving away till midnight. Yes, I'll do the late hours when I'm required, and if I'm preparing for court, if I'm doing an 8-10 o'clock night, but that's not every night. My kids see me work hard, but they got to remember me as their father as well, not as an absent father who was never home.
How did I want to stop you there, but how did your mindset change when you had kids being being self-employed? How did everything change for you in that respect? Because what you've just said is that family comes first. Family is most important. I want to provide the life for them, but I want to be there for them. When you didn't have kids, I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to say you were just gung-ho, work. Yeah. What was the shift like, and what was the aha moment for you?
I think being raised in a traditional European family, being from Italian descent, south of Italy as well, so very stubborn. We're taught that we live our life for our kids, right? So, I can't remember what I was doing before I had kids. Or if I do think back, I was like, what was I doing? Playing PlayStation or like playing the Wii or...
What is this time I had?
Yeah, like where did it go? How much time did I waste?
Yeah.
And it was a lot of it was spent on studying. A lot of it was spent on learning. Like when we first came into the profession, it was very rare to leave work before 8 o'clock. And it was very normal to work till 10 and then be back in the office at 8 a.m. in the morning. So it was the profession is very selfish in that regard because even in the top tier law firms, they don't care if you got kids. They'll just get next off the ranking and they'll work their asses off at that level. From once I had kids and then got self-employed, I realized that what I do is for our kids' futures.
Mhm.
Like it's to set up their financial future. But it's also there to give us that flexibility that if we want to go away for 4 weeks a year, we can go and travel for 4 weeks a year. Everyone knows the banal analogy of a self-employed being married to their job. You know, everyone says, become self-employed, you get all this freedom.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden you just work.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful thing working with my wife because we're doing it jointly together for our own family. I think, the unintended consequences, we won't actually talk about work at home, which is really nice.
That's good. That's a good balance.
As soon as we cross that threshold of the door, we become parents and we're parents for our kids. Yeah, there's natural conversations here and there about how we can do things better, but it's not about the trauma of work or the vicarious trauma we get from our matters. And it's not all vicarious trauma. Like we achieve some really successful results and get some nice feedback. I got a voucher the other day from a client who I thought didn't like me. She got me a Mt.Pleasant voucher and said some really nice things about me. And I
I
thought,
hope you disclose that one now that you're saying it.
that'd be good for a Google review. But the shift in mindset was, I'm doing this for not just my kids' futures and our education, but for our own internal happiness as well. I'm not doing this selfishly to have my name up in lights, even though I do a lot of video content. At the end of the day, you're either creating content or you're consuming content.
Yeah.
So the more attention that's on Snow Law, the better, because then we're front of mind, right?
Yeah.
Everyone,
Anybody that thinks that it's an ego thing, I think it is. I think they are definitely wrong.
yeah.
It's marketing for the business, and you're a business owner, and you've got to get the business out there.
Well, you have to in today's modern age.
Yeah.
Like, and
Unfortunately.
it's a mix of tradition and innovation. Like we still do a lot of network meetings at Geelong Chamber, BNI, coffee meetings with professionals to see whether they like working with us. So it's a bit of the old and the new. But it's, when I deliver services, it's not that egocentric. I come from a place of knowledge. I come from a place of studying law for so long. I just see myself, and I said this all the time, as a glorified problem solver. Like, you've got a problem, you've come to me to solve it.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, the profession has a bad stigma against it because we charge by the 6-minute billable hour. So we don't, at Snow Law, we don't charge that way. So we show them, hey, this is what it's going to cost you to get the job done. If you're happy, then we'll send you a retainer and we'll start working for you. So I find that's a more transparent and accountable conversation with the client to then convert them. Like, we've only lost maybe half a dozen clients in the last 5 years.
And you're going to lose clients. You're going to have runoff, but they're good numbers to have.
Well, yeah, in terms of conversion rates, but naturally, like, it's funny how in the profession you'll have, like, there's a lawyer on every corner block. Like, I've got cousins who have done conveyancing and paid for conveyancing, and I'm like, why wouldn't you come to your oldest, cousin? It's family, it'd be for free, right?
Yeah.
But they don't equate me as being a lawyer to doing their conveyancing work, or they'll think, I don't want to trouble you, I won't call you. But literally, people have different lawyers for different reasons, and then compartmentalize what services they provide.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think lawyers should be doing more collaborative work together. They should actually, if I'm doing family law work, then that family lawyer should be talking to that wills and estates lawyer. And
It's adding extra strings to the bow.
Whereas
that's so important, especially these days.
Yeah, but the traditional lawyer model is, if I'm doing your family law work, I'm doing your wills and estates, I'm doing your conveyancing, I'm doing everything. Whereas I refer out to other lawyers all the time in commercial litigation space because that's not my area of law. If it's a corporation's winding up proceeding, I'm sending out to a sufficiently experienced lawyer, and that we can collaborate together. And I'm only sending them to people who I know I've worked with in the profession, and it's good having been in Geelong. We know a lot of lawyers in the profession out here who have good reputations and don't charge an arm and a leg, and we'll provide an obligation-free consult so that they can see if they're the right fit for the client. So, having been out here for 11 years now, I've got a substantial network that I can tap into and pick up the phone and say, what do you think about this matter? Do you think this is the right matter for you? Or I'll have lawyers referring me work for those clients that they think aren't the right fit for their firm, but perfect for me because I bring my legal aid social justice background to that, where it's like, well, we're the gatekeepers of the justice system. We need to take that role seriously, and we need to provide access to justice, whether that's doing their conveyancing or getting their wills done, but something that's at an affordable rate so that they can access that system. We can provide that solution to them without charging an arm and a leg. We're real people just like them. We go through the same pain points that they go through, and we need to learn and empathize with what they're going through at the situation at that time. So, I bring that social equity from my legal aid background, but in a business mindset. So, yeah, I find the client journeys are enjoyable because we live it with them, even if it's just a simple conveyancing matter. or if it's just a simple will, it's really finding out who that client is. So, you'll have a lot of law firms who have got business owners who bring in the work and then just farm it out to whoever they've got. You want a lawyer who's a business owner, but then he's hands-on in the business doing the work and finding out all about you so they can deliver the service.
That's the relationship basis that people want to deal with you. That's why they want to deal with. And as I reflected before on, there's so many different mortgage brokers out there with different setups. Like it's just about finding the right fit for you and who you like and the relationship. Almost every person that I deal with now, whether it's a dentist, doctor, like I've got a conveyancer, whoever it is that's a professional, I have a relationship with them because I'm comfortable with them. I couldn't care if they moved to Melbourne, I'd still deal with them.
Yeah.
If they move, change locations, like this is the person that I have a relationship with that knows me, knows my situation, and that cares about me. And that ultimately, to me, not for everybody, I'm not a really transactional person that's, it's done, see you later. I care that someone has their best interest looking at me.
Yeah,
and I believe that the people that I deal with have my best interest at heart. Whenever I see them or deal with them. So I want my clients to feel the same when they come and see me.
Yeah,
I think that's
right.
really, really important. If you look at something like a market like Melbourne, it's not like that.
No.
It's not like
very
that.
cold.
It's very cold and it's very transactional, where we come to a place like Geelong where it's a very relationship based, and it's the 6 degree of separation with
Well, that's why I think people come out. That's why I think people come out here, right? Like they want that sense of community.
Yeah.
But then there's that accountability within that community as well, So if you stuff up, you put your hand up and you apologize as long as you haven't suffered any damages to a client, that's fine. I mean, that's why we have professional.
People make mistakes.
We have professional indemnity insurance. We're not perfect. AI makes mistakes. But this is why I think in our two professions and across the board as a whole in professional services, AI can only take you so far because it is still that relationship-based business. People want to know that you're looking after their kids and their kids' kids, and they can come to you, and they're our family's lawyer, just like that's our family's doctor. That's just like our family's dentist. That's been a bit too dispersed at the moment. So, we have private organizations who are trying to solve a government problem, like Wishkeeper has an online database where you can store all your client records. And then you have that succession piece where the kids and their kids' kids know where all your deeds are kept because they've got access to that portal. There's a national wills bank, but there's also, like, for example, the Legal Services Board, who has custody of a lot of wills, is now moving into the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court will hold custody of all those wills. So, there's always this trouble about people finding wills or certified enduring power of attorneys to use immediately, but they're rushing around calling 6 different firms. Oh, do you still hold this, or do you have that? Or it's like trying to find a title these days. If there's paper titles that are still around, they're lost in the wind because they're all electronic. So you've got to do an investigative search and find out, okay, where's the demographic, who held it last, where was it, where was it issued to, who had it in safe custody. So I think at the end of the day, it's still that relationships-based business, especially out here. Like you said, it's not 6 degrees separation, it's 3 degrees of separation here. There's that colloquial saying that if you fart in Geelong, someone will smell it, that But at the end of the day, your professional reputation is so important out here that there's a lot more accountability, and therefore you get better innovation, better quality service delivery than just being a cog in a wheel in Melbourne where your name or reputation is not on the line. So I think that's actually a good note to finish on. Brandon from Mt.Pleasant Financial, thank you for coming on board. As a token of our appreciation at Stay Frosty, here's a little nice beanie for you, mate.
I'll even whack it on for you now.
There we go. Twinning. Beauty. Good work, mate.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you for coming.
Thank you.